In what promises to be a unique conversation between two high flyers in the area of international law, I'd like to introduce my two guests this week on my program, Israel Connection, who have agreed to talk with me about a range of controversial topics. In this day and age, this kind of conversation is a rarity as people with views about Israel, its policies and current wars with Iran, in Lebanon, in Gaza, violent outbreaks on the West Bank and forays against the Houthis have been dominating the media. Firstly, Nitsana Darshan-Leitner is an Israeli attorney, human rights activist, and the founder of the civil rights organisation Shurat HaDin Israel Law Centre. She has been at the forefront of defending Israel's interests on the global legal stage. She has spearheaded efforts to counteract campaigns that seek to delegitimize Israel and disrupt its security. Her innovative approach involves using legal avenues to challenge hostile activities targeting the Jewish state, including offensive litigation, that means the opposite of defensive, and direct confrontation of those who advocate for the BDS movement. Now, Chris Sidoti is a United Nations Commissioner on the Permanent UN Commission of Inquiry into the Occupied Palestinian Territories, East Jerusalem and Israel. He is an Australian expert on international human rights law, a lawyer and advocate. He is a former Human Rights Commissioner and a former Commissioner of the Australian Law Reform Commission and has held a range of other distinguished posts. I'm now going to ask both Nitsana and Chris to introduce themselves, and after that I have prepared a set of questions that I have shared with you both that will provide the basis for our conversation that will ensue over the next hour. So Nitsana, can I ask you perhaps to kick off?
Well, thank you very much for having me on this show and to debate or to have a discussion actually with Chris. Just briefly, I'm the president of Shurat HaDin. Shurat HaDin is a civil rights organization based in Israel that take Israel's enemies to court. We've been fighting terror financing, bringing lawsuits against everyone who wants to destroy the Jewish state by terror attacks and their financial patrons. Hamas, Islamic Jihad, PLO, the Palestinian Authority, countries like Iran, Syria, North Korea, entities like the Palestinian Authority. We've sued banks that provide financial services to organizations like Arab banks, European banks, Chinese banks, Lebanese banks. We went after the social media networks that provide the terror organization with a platform, sued Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google for aiding and abetting terrorism. And we've been quite successful. We won billions of dollars in judgments so far and collected them on behalf of the terror victims. Terror victims received compensations, and we blocked funding from going to the hands of the terror organizations. We put liens on Iranian assets, buildings, bank accounts. We settled cases out of court with the Palestinian Authority who agreed to pay. And if they don't agree to pay, we go after the tax money that Israel collects for them on a monthly basis. We got banks to compromise, to pay victims billions of dollars. Everybody who is accountable and responsible for the terror attacks had to pay. Our message was very clear. Nobody can kill a Jew and go without pay. In addition to this, we are involved with protecting IDF soldiers and the state of Israel throughout many, many years from false war crime allegations, both in the international court or any tribunal that has international jurisdiction. We've been fighting on behalf of the state of Israel against those who delegitimize it, those who boycott it, those who violate laws by boycotting Israel, like Airbnb that boycott Israel, like Ben & Jerry's that decided to boycott Israel. We blocked the Gaza flotillas when they are trying to invade Israel and to break the sea blockade that Israel legally imposed for Gaza. In short, we've been dealing for more than 2 decades in the legal theater in order to defend Jews, defend Israelis, and protect the Jewish state.
Well, thanks, Nitsana. Can I now ask Chris to start his opening remarks?
Thanks, David, and thanks, Nitsana. David, you've already given a pretty good rundown of my background. I've been involved in human rights work now for well over 50 years. Um, One thing you didn't mention that prior to undertaking this current role as a commissioner on the Commission of Inquiry on Palestine and Israel, I was also a commissioner on a similar inquiry for the UN dealing with Myanmar. And I have been involved with Myanmar for a very long time and continue that involvement now. I've worked with national human rights institutions in most parts of the Asia Pacific, but particularly in Afghanistan, which has been a situation that's always been of grave concern to me. Um, I should add that as of January this year, I've been married for 50 years. I got 3 kids, 4 grandkids, and 1 great-grandkid. And that's probably the most significant thing that I've done in my now 75 years. I turned 75 last month. So that's pretty well me.
Well, I can say we're the same age there, Chris.
The old men,
We've got
the old
yes.
men in the sea.
So let's start off with the questions that I've shared with you, and see we've got quite a bundle here. I don't know whether we're going to get through everything, but let's see how we go. But I've kind of prioritized them, I think, with the ones that I think are the more significant ones that we'll definitely start off with. The accusation of genocide that has been levelled against Israel over its war in Gaza. A September 2025 report that was issued by your independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territories in Israel found reasonable grounds to conclude that Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The inquiry identified 4 out of the 5 acts in the 1948 Genocide Convention, which are murder, causing serious harm, inflicting destructive life conditions, and preventing births. And these were committed with intent, is the argument that you have put forward. Do you want to put to us why you decided that this was, in fact, the case from your point of view?
The report was released, as you say, David, in September last year. And so that was 2 years into the current level or escalated conflict within Gaza. Unlike many other individuals and organisations, it took us a long time to come to this conclusion. And we did so only after we had conducted our own investigations. We've issued over the last now 2.5 years a large number of reports dealing with the situation in Gaza in particular, but also the events of 7 October 2023 in southern Israel and events on the West Bank. The conclusions that we made in our report on genocide last September were founded in the investigative work that we had undertaken. We had looked at the military strategy employed in Gaza. That was one of the 3 reports we issued in June 2024. We looked at particular aspects of the war in Gaza, in particular sexual and gender-based violence, the treatment of detainees, the treatment of hostages as well, of course. But it was very much on the basis of a series of initial reports dealing with the results of our investigations that first we came to the conclusion that 4 of the 5 categories of genocidal act, the categories you listed, had occurred since October 2023 in Gaza. We then turned to the far more difficult question about genocidal intent. And this is a difficult question. It's hard to prove genocidal intent. And the test established by the International Court of Justice in the case of Bosnia against Serbia some 20 years ago is a very high test. It requires that genocidal intent be the only reasonable inference that can be drawn from the facts. So we looked at that. We took the total situation, the total picture of what had occurred in Gaza since October 2023. We looked at a number of individual incidents that we had investigated, and we looked as well at statements that were made by Israeli leaders in positions of command responsibility, whether in the government or in the military. And it was on the basis of all that evidence, the evidence that we ourselves collected, not that others had reported, that we came to this conclusion. We did so after a long period of time. We did so after the investigations that we had conducted, and as I say, based on our own investigations. I should indicate, though, that the standard of proof that we apply, as you indicated, is reasonable grounds to conclude. We're not a criminal court. In fact, we're not a court at all. We're a legal institution, but we're not a court. And the standard of proof is reasonable grounds to conclude for all of these investigative bodies like ours. The authoritative decision on this question will be given by the International Court of Justice. It's still to hear that case and make its decision. But certainly, applying the evidentiary methods the commissions of inquiry apply, applying the standard of proof that we are bound to observe, this is the conclusion that we came to on reasonable grounds.
Nitsana.
Yes, yes. How come you found that it wasn't reasonable that the atrocities that happened in Gaza were made actually from Hamas behavior, conduct, and violation of international law? How come it wasn't reasonable in your eyes that when Hamas embedded into population, into civilians, and shoot rockets from these areas, and Israel has to retaliate because Israel cannot be shot at without a response, and it shot over terrorists that are hiding among civilians or hiding in hospitals, and as a result of it, civilians get hurt because this is where Hamas is hiding. And hospitals get hit because this is where Hamas is shooting rockets from. And buildings are destroyed because this is where Hamas is snipering from. How come it wasn't reasonable that this is the result of Hamas act and violation of international law? How come it was only reasonable that Israel is the one that commits genocide, where you well states that there is no intention on the side of Israel? You base it on a couple of states of military, perhaps I didn't hear military, but politicians that after October 7 were so outrageous and stated some words, but there was no directive, no policy of the Israeli government or the Israeli military to go and eliminate the population in Gaza. As a matter of fact, Israel was very cautious with the population in Gaza. Israel I don't know, I hate saying a moral state because I'm not so in favor of Israel being so moral. Israel has to protect its soldiers. Israel has to do anything it can to protect itself. And yet, Israel went into Gaza and warned the population to vacate the buildings before they take them down. Israel went and made phone calls and sent SMS to the population to vacate their houses before it goes in. Israel even paved them a way to go through, to go to the south, to go to the camp and build them camps. If Israel really wanted to eliminate this population, why did they care? Why did they warn them? Why did they set them and build them camps and provide them with ton of humanitarian aid? Israel wanted to really to starve the population, to destroy it completely, to wipe out Gaza from the face of the earth. Why did it do all these things? Your conclusion derives, as you say, based on previous reports that also, I may believe or guess, are based on Hamas narrative, Hamas saying without checking the facts in the ground. As a matter of fact, you weren't able to check the facts on the ground because you did not speak to any military officials, right? You didn't speak to any military official. You didn't go into Gaza. You weren't allowed to. So this conclusion of genocide is totally baseless, and unfortunately, the same reasonable measure that you could have taken to the other side your committee just simply biased against Israel and came with this conclusion, wrong conclusion.
Just before you respond, Chris, I want to say that the consequence of a report like yours has been a general acceptance that Israel is guilty of committing genocide. And this is premature, of course, as you would agree, because the International Court of Justice has still not deliberated. And perhaps it may be that you've jumped the gun, and the consequence of this, as we're now witnessing in Australia in particular with the Royal Commission, is that we've seen what is a normalisation of this accusation of genocide and a significant upsurge in anti-Semitism globally. So hasn't that been a sad consequence of your judgment?
The two of you have raised so many questions, and it's very difficult to deal with all of them. Let me just say at the beginning, though, that, David, in respect of your last point, you're assuming a causative connection that has not yet been established. The Royal Commission here in Australia, I hope, will come out one way or another. It's just an assumption at this stage that a finding of genocide has caused a rise of anti-Semitism. Now, the increase in anti-Semitism, I think, is undoubted, and it's extremely serious. It is outrageous. There's no doubt about any of those factors. It has increased. But the Royal Commission is in a position to decide what, if any, connection there is with any aspect of the Gaza situation. There is now some evidence that the act of the two mass murderers in December was connected with the Gaza situation. We'll know from the trial about the nature of that. But at this stage, there is nothing to indicate that the protests against Gaza, let alone our reporting, has any connection with the rise of anti-Semitism at all. We need to be careful about this issue of causation, and that's something that we have to take into account. Nitsana, in your introduction, you made very clear that your job and the job of your organisation is to defend the state of Israel. And so I accept that your questioning is the questioning of a good defence attorney. It's not the result of the investigative work that we do. We have no interest in defending anybody or in attacking anybody. Our job is to investigate, to find the facts on the basis of reasonable conclusions, reasonable grounds to conclude, and to report on that. We have not been to Gaza because the Israeli authorities have unlawfully prevented us from going to Gaza. The Israeli authorities are entitled, if they wish, under international law, to prevent us going to Israel, and they have done that. They have no legal entitlement to prevent us going to Gaza. We have not spoken to any Israeli serving military personnel because we have asked and we have been denied approval. We have asked something like 12 or 14 times for the Israeli authorities to enable us to speak to the military, to enable us to have access to Israel and to Gaza. We never even receive responses to our requests. But it's no longer critical to have access to sites to be able to gather evidence. When I was doing a similar job in relation to Myanmar, the Myanmar military junta refused us access to Myanmar. It's absolutely standard that these now couple of dozen of UN commissions of inquiry are denied access to the country under investigation. In our case, we had access to over 15,000 items of digital evidence, photographs, videos, produced by a wide variety of individuals and institutions, all of which, including large numbers of Israeli soldiers, let me say, posted on the web or otherwise made available to us. We have had access to individuals who are eyewitnesses to what has occurred. We have not been able to speak to senior military leaders, but we have spoken to Israeli soldiers, a significant number of them. We have spoken to a very large number of doctors, health workers, humanitarian workers who have been in Gaza and are eyewitnesses to what they saw and what they experienced. So we have had no shortage of evidence. Let me put that issue to rest right at the beginning. The question about Hamas using human shields is a significant issue, and it has been raised repeatedly by the Israeli authorities. We sought the evidence from the Israeli authorities on which they were making those allegations. And as I've indicated, the Israeli authorities don't even reply. We have used the digital information. We have used our interviews with doctors, humanitarian workers, and others. We have found incidents where the Hamas fighters have been operating from hospitals at some point. But there was only one incident that we could establish where the hospital was the center of firing towards Israeli soldiers from the Hamas militants. We did find the use of educational buildings by the Israeli military, let me add, including the long-term occupation of some university buildings as barracks and headquarters by the Israeli military. So this is a two-side street in itself. Hamas is not entitled to use any civilian property for military purposes. But even if we accept that that has occurred, even if hospitals or schools or residential buildings were being used by Hamas for military purposes, that does not authorize the Israeli military to do whatever it wants to destroy that hospital or that school or the residential building. The international law relating to the use of force still applies. Necessity, proportionality, distinction between civilians and non-civilians. Part of our concern from the very beginning of the Israeli military operation at the end of 2023 has been the failure to implement international law in relation to distinction between civilians and non-civilians, and particularly the issue of proportionality. The extent of the destruction in Gaza indicates a military strategy of total destruction in relation to the Gaza itself. The building, 90% of hospitals, over 90% of schools, almost 100% of the population of Gaza displaced. We looked at the question about the notice that was given by the Israeli authorities. Yes, notice was given, but in almost all cases, the notice was very short and people had nowhere to go to. The Israeli authorities, as belligerents, had an obligation to act to protect the civilian population. It was not just an obligation to give notice, but to facilitate evacuation, to provide alternative places of refuge, to provide healthcare and food. And these things were simply not done. We have repeated evidence, eyewitness reports and video and digital evidence of people being attacked while being evacuated, of places that were declared safe zones being subjected to bombardment, both from the air and from the ground, and so forth. So although I accept lawyers have to defend their clients, your job is to defend the state of Israel and the Israeli military. Our job is to investigate. And for us, what we found met the standard of proof that is imposed on us to look at it and make conclusions on the basis of reasonable grounds. That's what we did.
I must reply. In your investigation, you didn't find any military bases of Hamas, did you?
Military base?
One military base of Hamas? Did you find a military compound of Hamas in Gaza? I'm talking about Gaza. Did you find a military base where Hamas is training, a command where they're sending their soldiers from? Did you see Hamas wearing insignia? Did you see a soldier named Hamas terrorist? Did you see any military action in Gaza? You have not. You know why? Because they are using hospitals as their bases.
Where is the evidence, Nitsana?
Because they are using high schools. Where are they? Where are the evidence? Show me, you tell me. Where are they acting from? Where are they? Israel intentionally wants to destroy the hospitals. Israel intentionally wants to be blamed for war crimes. Israel intentionally wants to eliminate all the high schools. Where are Hamas acting from? Where are they shooting their rockets into Israel? From where? From where? From civil infrastructure, from buildings, from hospitals, from kindergarten, from mosques. And this is why Israel did not have a choice but to destroy these buildings. Because if Hamas would have kept the international law, it would have wear insignias. It would have acted inside military bases, as the law obligates them to do. But you know what? It's an unfair war. There is no equivalent between a democratic state to a terror organization. A democratic state has to oblige the international law, has to respect human rights, has to be cautious and careful about human life. A terror organization does not. A terror organization has no obligation, not to international law, to his own people. Hamas knew precisely that when they hide among civilians, these civilians will be killed. He knew that when he's acting inside hospital, this hospital will be destroyed. He knew that, and yet he did it. And he did it not because he didn't have a choice. He did it deliberately because he wanted these pictures. He wanted this 150,000 evidence that you watched, that you examined. He wanted this to convince you that Israel is committing war crimes. But if you were just fair enough to understand that Israel doesn't have a choice, as you would not have a choice, you Australians would not have a choice if New Zealand terror organization would fire rockets on you. Not one, not twice, thousands of rockets. You would not have a choice. You would not have a choice if a New Zealand terror organization would invade your territory and rape your women and your children and burn them alive. You would not have a choice, right? You will have to swear to eliminate this terror organization. Would you? I'm asking you, Chris, would you? Or you just give it a wave? Say, okay, shit happens. What can I do? Let's continue with life. So after October 7, Israel vowed to destroy Hamas, to eliminate it completely. And Hamas used this fact that the international hates Israel. And don't tell me they don't. Just don't tell me they don't. Otherwise, how can you justify Agenda 7 in the UN Human Rights Commission that obliges the committee every single time they meet to discuss Israel? From all the countries in the world, every single time to discuss Israel. The world hates Israel. I know that. You know that. Everybody knows that. But Israel knows that they have to survive. I want to survive. I want to live here. I want to raise my kids. As you do. You have grandchildren. You want them to live. So Israel had to go to Gaza and to destroy this Hamas organization. And if you would have been fair enough, you and your colleagues in the UN or any tribunal or any legal, you would examine the facts clearly and understand that Hamas fools you. Hamas plays with you. And you fell into their trap, unfortunately.
Chris, can I ask you?
I need to correct one thing where you're wrong in law, Nitsana. Hamas, as a non-state armed actor in international law, does have international legal obligations. You said it didn't. It does. And we have found that Hamas committed war crimes. We found even before October 7, 2023, that Hamas's firing of rockets from Gaza into Israel constituted a war crime. We found the commission of war crimes by Hamas on 7-8 October 2023. We found the commission of war crimes in relation to the Israeli hostages after 7 October 2023. So they have obligations, and we have found those obligations. You seem to be assuming, however, that Israel's obligation to defend its citizens, and that is an international legal obligation. It's not just Israel having the right to defend its citizens. The state of Israel has an obligation to defend its citizens. But in law, that does not entitle to do whatever it wants to do, or even whatever it considers necessary. It must be proportionate. It must clearly discriminate between civilians and combatants. And it's those two failures that have been the principal concern of ours when we are looking at the actual experience of what has happened. Even if we could establish that there was a command centre under a hospital, and we have not received evidence that a command centre was found under a hospital. I've talked about evidence that we have received about the use of a civilian premise as a hospital for military purposes, but not the presence of a command centre there. But even if that could be established, that doesn't entitle the state to completely destroy the hospital without any sense of proportionality. And that's where the failure has occurred. It's failed to take into account the presence of civilians and to develop military strategies that are proportionate to the harm that is being caused, to the military necessity of striking against a hostile military force. It's a legal question, proportionality. The end doesn't justify the means in international law, as Nitsana, you know. And that's what our concern is, that the legitimate objectives that Israel may have had at various points do not justify any form of action being taken in response. So this question of disproportionality, and you look at that in what I described as the policy of the military strategy of total destruction, that's the result of it.
But you agree that the ratio of the proportionality in the Gaza war is the lowest ever that haven't been?
No, I don't. 21,000 kids have been killed. 10,000 women have been killed. The rate of civilian deaths and injuries has been higher than in most other conflicts this century. The possible exception is Sudan. We still don't have the full, I'm not an expert on Sudan, let me say, but we still don't have a full picture of casualties in Sudan. But with the possible exception of Sudan, this conflict in Gaza over the last 2.5 years has been without equal in civilian deaths, injuries, and impact.
Could I pose a point that's been raised, and it's one of the questions I was going to get to. Your accusations, haven't they been refuted, Chris, by the assessment of independent military experts like Richard Kemp, John Spencer, etc.? I mean, there were also, if I go back to the 2014 Gaza conflict, when we saw similar things going on, there was this high-level military group that said the IDF fought an exemplary campaign and adhered to international standards. The ratio of deaths of combatants to civilians has been higher than in any other urban warfare combat, according to these military experts. Where are the military experts that have contradicted the views of these ones that I've cited?
The ones you've cited, David, have been very vocal, and yes, they have expressed their views. There have been military experts, in fact, in many countries who have disputed that, and particularly the statistics, as I've indicated, with the possible exception of Sudan, the rate of civilian casualties and civilian harm has been higher in Gaza than in any other conflict in this century. Look, I don't dispute the fact that different people may come to different conclusions, and that applies as much to lawyers as it does to military people. But it's certainly not the case that there is a general view amongst military experts that Israel is entirely justified in what it has done. In fact, there are many who will argue against that, including, I have to say, including former senior leaders of the Israeli Defense Force itself. So um, it's not the common view, but I don't even think it's the majority view amongst military experts who have knowledge of what has happened in Gaza.
Let me just relate to this, the proportionality issue, because it's important. When I ask you think it's proportional. When there are tunnels underneath the hospital, how is Israel supposed to treat the tunnels? How is Israel supposed to deal with this threat, if not destroying the hospital? If this is used as a basis command. But I want to dive into the proportionality. Do you know, you said 25,000 children were killed. You base it on the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is run by Hamas, obviously. I don't know the
numbers. Whose figures the IDF now accepts.
I'm not getting into it. I'm not getting into it. This is the numbers. Maybe true. I believe it's not true, completely untrue, but you believe it. You say 10,000 women were killed. Totally, in my eyes, not true, but let's take it. How many terrorists were killed? How many terrorists Israel killed? According to the IDF, I don't know, you can take it, you cannot take it, 30,000 terrorists were killed. If you had 30,000 terrorists versus the 35 women and children that were killed, don't you think it's proportionality? Don't you think 1-to-1 is proportionate? Because in other wars, there was 1-to-10. In Afghanistan, it was 1-to-4. On each one terrorist, 4 civilians are killed. According to your count, 35,000 women and children killed versus 30,000 terrorists killed. I say it again. Israel went into this war with legal advisors, sitting in every tank, sitting in every cockpit. I am against it. Tell you right forward, I'm against it. But this is what they did. And they did in order to prevent these allegations of disproportionality, of genocide. And here you come and take the same numbers and conclude different. Now, it's not that you are not a tribunal and you are not a court, and therefore, your conclusion is this shuffle along. It's not. It's you and another committee and another committee and another general and another thing that built up this blood libel against Israel of genocide. If Israel really wanted to commit genocide, you yourself said they would have just intentionally killed all the people there. They did not. And Hamas, as I said before, and I'm not going to repeat it because we have other questions to go through, is using you and alike to continue this war against Israel. If you really wanted to protect the life of the Palestinians in Gaza, if you really cared about them, you would have formed a committee that called the entire world to join the force to destroy Hamas. Because the Palestinians in Gaza are not being hurt by Israel. They are hurt by a terror organization that took them hostage. They don't care about their life. They desire their death. That's what you should have done if you really care about human rights in Gaza.
I just need to deal with, I need to deal with the issue of statistics. I'm sorry. The Israeli Defense Forces is not saying that 35,000 terrorists have been killed. The figure that it's now giving is between 15 and 17,000. For 35,000 terrorists to have been killed, that would mean that every single adult male who has been killed in Gaza was a terrorist, because the number of adult males killed in Gaza is around about 30,000. And that's just not rationally possible. And the Israeli military did at one stage, many years ago, say 30,000, but more recently it said 15 to 17,000. And it's also now accepted the Ministry of Health figures, as it has in the past. So those stats are not just right. They're not correct. But I go back to saying that, and sorry, the other thing I should say, again, Nitsana, as you know, the definition of genocide in the Genocide Convention doesn't require the destruction of the whole group. It says in whole or in part. So it's not necessary to establish an intention to destroy or kill 2.3 million people in Gaza to establish the crime of genocide under the Genocide Convention. It's sufficient to establish an intention to destroy the group in part. And that was very important in the case of Myanmar, which, as I mentioned, I was investigating previously. So it's important to apply the law as it's established.
I agree. But even if you go by your numbers, let's say 15,000 terrorists versus 40, 35, what did you say?
60,000 non-terrorists. If we 75,000 killed, if 15,000 are terrorists, there are 60,000 others. So we're talking here about 15%.
I'm not making up. I'm not blaming you. You just rely on the reports from the social media of guys.
No, I accept the IDF figures.
Go over this.
Can I just butt in? We need to move on.
Yeah.
Not arguing about numbers. I mean, I can cynically say that Israel definitely had an intent to destroy part of the population in Gaza, and that was the part of the population there that is Hamas. So that's one way you can look at it, Chris, if you want to interpret it according to rules of genocide. But Nitsana, can I ask you? Critics have labelled Shurat HaDin as a government-organised, non-governmental organisation over its ties to the Israeli government, and you have also been accused of conducting pro-Israel lawfare. What do you say to accusations about using lawfare?
I'm defending Israel, and I'm bringing lawsuits against those who destroy it. So if you call it lawfare, you can call it lawfare. I don't see it lawfare. I see it finding people accountable to harm they commit against the Jewish state. When I bring lawsuits against the organizations, it's only for the mere reason that they killed Israelis. And I don't bring it myself, I bring it on behalf of victims that really were killed by this organization, that were really get damaged by those who sent these organizations. If I bring a lawsuit against Airbnb, it's for the mere fact that Airbnb boycott Israel. If I go to the international tribunals and file war complaints against Hamas terrorists, it's because of the fact that they really commit war crimes. So, no, we are not engaged with lawfare. We are engaged with protecting Israel civilly in the courts.
As a subsequent question to that, isn't the Palestinian Authority using international legal forums to delegitimize Israel and is using lawfare in a way which you would find great exception to, and in fact is in contravention of the Oslo Accords, which are requiring that negotiations will avoid these unilateral changes that have been going on, for example, the recognition of the statehood of Palestine?
Of course. The Palestinian Authority violated every single section in the Oslo Accords, including the ones that disallow it to go to international tribunals and commit warfare against Israel. But the Palestinian Authority declared very clearly in 2015 that if Israel does not agree to its conditions, they will go to the International Criminal Court and file war complaint against Israel, and they did. And they did at the time that we, in Shurat HaDin, we won a lawsuit against the Palestinian Authority in a federal court in New York, given by a jury, finding actually the Palestinian Authority involved with crimes against humanity, with aiding and abetting terrorism, in particularly the pay-per-slave policy of the Palestinian Authority that induced terrorists to go and kill Israelis and pay them retroactively. The jury found the Palestinian Authority responsible for 24 acts of terrorism and gave us a judgment against them for $655 million. So if you compare an objective jury to a biased tribunal, here you have the federal court in New York, and here you have the International Criminal Court that proves itself to be totally biased against Israel. I think you can reach a conclusion who is really committing war crimes here.
Do you have anything to say in defense of the Palestinian Authority at all, Chris?
Not my job to defend the Palestinian Authority.
Okay.
I'm sure
Nitsana's job is to defend the state of
sure
Israel. It's not my job to defend anybody.
Well,
I'm sure even Chris is against the pay-for-slave policy of the Palestinian Authority, aren't you, Chris?
Sorry?
I'm saying, I'm sure even you are against the pay-for-slave policy of the Palestinian Authority.
I am against paying anybody for the act of murder, but whether the Palestinian Authority has a pay-for-slave policy is another matter.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, so as a United Nations representative, though, Chris, being part of the this permanent commission of inquiry, do you take stock of the arguments that people who support Israel believe that the United Nations is inherently biased against Israel, with 17 resolutions in 2024 targeting Israel compared to 7 for the rest of the world?
Look, I respond in two ways, David. The first is I don't have any mandate as part of the Commission of Inquiry to examine what the United Nations is doing. So my comment is a personal comment. You know, I'm not a United Nations official. I'm appointed as a United Nations Commissioner on the Commission of Inquiry. But I will make a personal comment as someone who's been involved for human rights for a very, very long time. I know that there is an inequality in the number of resolutions and the amount of time discussing Israel in relation to other conditions, other situations. For me, that doesn't lead to a conclusion that the UN discusses and passes resolutions on Israel too much. It leads to a conclusion that the UN is not spending enough time on other situations as well. That's what I think the situation is. We need to be spending in the UN system more time on other situations in addition to maintaining the very important focus on Israel. And that focus is important because the United Nations has a particular direct institutional responsibility for the situation in Israel and Palestine. The situation came about because of UN General Assembly Resolution 181(2) passed in 1947, which established the end, which terminated the British mandate and said that there were to be two states, an Israeli or a Jewish state and an Arab state. Now, there is no situation in the world today for which the UN bears a share of the responsibility as it does in relation to Palestine and Israel. And so it has to accept that responsibility and respond to it, I'm afraid. But it needs to be doing far more about other human rights situations as well.
If you have a limited budget, limited hours, limited time, limited means and sources, would you divide it fairly among all catastrophes in the world? Wouldn't you divide it evenly among all the war crimes committed around the world? Just Israel? Only on Israel? You have limited sources. You have catastrophe going on in Sudan. How often the UN deals with Sudan? Myanmar, how often they did that? Saudi Arabia, Iran just slaughtering 40,000 people in the recent war, like a couple of months ago. Did you hear anything in the UN dealing with?
Well, let me take that example. The UN does have a similar commission to ours dealing with Israel and Palestine, dealing with Iran. It also has a special rapporteur dealing with Iran. It has a commission of inquiry dealing with Sudan. It has mechanisms dealing with South Sudan, with Democratic Republic of Congo, with Ukraine and Russia. So these other bodies exist. I don't think that people in Israel understand the extent of the UN's human rights mechanisms. So
And yet,
they are there, but I still agree that not enough time and attention is given to human rights situations in particular countries.
But if you look at the resolutions that the UN passes on Israel, for example, they are would be seen to be showing an anti-Israel bias. For example, why did UNESCO and the General Assembly pass multiple resolutions that failed to recognise Jewish entitlement to the Temple Mount, and often referring to the site solely by its Muslim names, Al Harim, Al Sharif, or Al Aqsa Mosque? Don't these seem to show an ignorance of the proper historical Jewish connection to this land that became Israel?
I can't speak for the whole UN system. As I said, I'm a commissioner
Yes.
on a commission of inquiry. I'll speak for what we're doing. The UN is a political body when you deal with institutions or mechanisms, organs like UNESCO or the General Assembly or the Security Council. It's up to them to speak for themselves. I don't defend them.
I just add last comment. The number of condemnation in the UN against Israel are more than most countries combined. So you can reach your conclusion.
I accept that, Nitsana, as a fact, and I reiterate the two comments I've made. The UN has a particular responsibility, and there is not enough attention being paid to other situations.
But if we speak about the particular inquiry that you're involved with, Chris, are there any other permanent inquiries that have been conducted in the same way as the one that you're involved with? I mean, you were the UN commissioner, okay? You retired last year very briefly, and have rejoined again with two others to reconstitute the commission. Any commission like this of inquiry, shouldn't it be showing an open-minded, impartial attitude to the points of contention here, when not to show such what would be deemed to be a one-sided criticism of what Israel's been doing?
I don't accept that it's a one-sided criticism, David. And I would simply say that every state that is under examination by a commission of inquiry like ours condemns it for being biased and one-sided and against. I was accused by the military junta in Myanmar when I was on the Myanmar Commission for being one-sided and biased and lacking in objectivity. Russia says the same thing about the Ukraine Commission of Inquiry. Iran says the same thing about the fact-finding mission there. Look, that's just par for the course. So far as I'm concerned, all of these institutions, all of these mechanisms, including ours, seek to approach their task objectively on the basis of evidence. We're investigative bodies first, and we report on the basis of our investigations. And my experience with the Myanmar inquiry, with this inquiry, is that that responsibility is discharged. Now, certainly those whose job it is to defend a state that is under investigation will always use whatever means they can in defence, and part of that is trying to discredit the inquiries. It's par for the course.
You know, it's just easy. It's easy to blame the country that can take the responsibility and can relate to the conclusion. If you would have concluded differently, that Hamas is responsible for the atrocity in Gaza, it's like a tree that falls in the forest, will not make any noise. The only way to be significant and to be heard is if you go against Israel. And you see it in all international organizations, including the UN. You say that UN doesn't have enough time to deal with other issues, and they should deal with other issues. Let them take less time to deal with Israel, to make them spare time to deal with other issues. The fact that the entire world is dealing with this little tiny country is called Jew hatred.
I didn't say that the UN doesn't have enough time. I said it should be dealing with these issues. And I consider that it needs more resources in these areas.
Should be dealing with
In
other
addition,
issues. Should be dealing with other issues. Don't deal so much with Israel. In the end, you have limited
no, I don't agree with
amount
that.
of time.
I agree with your first part. More time for other human rights situations. I don't agree with your second part. That doesn't mean spend less time on Israel.
Because you don't care. Because you don't care about other places. It's not sexy enough to deal with other
Nitsana,
places.
my track record
Who cares
shows...
that black tribes, who cares that blacks are killing blacks? Fight among tribes in Africa. Who cares? It's only with the Jews. Only when the Jews are involved, it's interesting, it's intriguing. UN spends more time on Israel. The whole world should consider because it's the Jews. If you care about other issues, you would investigate other issues. You would deal with other issues. You don't care. It's nice. It's good. It's sexy to deal with the Jews, to deal with Israel. There is no other justification.
I stand on my record, Nitsana.
Well, we've had a conversation. I mean, the last point you've made, Nitsana, reminds me of the book by Dana Horn, the world only loves dead Jews. There's,
I'm sorry, David.
you know, the book by Dana Horn. I forget the exact title. The world only loves dead Jews.
Oh.
It's kind of.
You know what, David? But I prefer to be hated Jew but alive.
All right. So, well, I had some other questions, but of course, we can't go on forever. I think we got to the crux of a lot of the issues that are relevant to this topic that we've been covering today. And I want to thank you both for conducting what I think was a pretty civil conversation with neither of you really talking over the other person, which is always a good thing to avoid. So I thank you both for your contribution today, and maybe we can repeat this kind of exercise another day with similar things to be discussed, because this area of discussion is very controversial and obviously of great interest to everybody, and that's why we've been doing this, to try and open a few doors for people to know what's going on behind the scenes.
Thank you very much, David, for conducting it.
Yeah, thanks, David, for arranging this. I certainly, as I said to you when you first made contact with me, I accept any invitations I receive. And thank you, Nitsana, for being willing to join with me today. I'm grateful for that.
Me too. Take care.
Well, thank you both, and we'll go about our normal business now after this. I think was very enjoyable, if one can describe it in those terms.
No,
more meaningful rather than enjoyable.
Okay.
I accept
Thank
that.
you, David. Thank you, Chris. It was
Okay.
very nice.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Anything you want to say before I cut it all up?
No, thanks very much, David. I really appreciated the opportunity, as I said. So thanks for organising, and happy to join you again if you want another one.
Yeah, well, we'll find something. I was going to ask you about some other things private, well, independently. I don't know whether. Can I ask you one question which was on my list, the last one? If the ICC did not seek an arrest warrant for Israel's President Herzog, why did you advocate that Israel should arrest him?
Well, we have examined the question about what he said. The ICC certainly has not publicly indicated that it's examining that. I think at the moment it's looking at some of the bigger picture things than President Herzog's individual responsibility. I mean, he's not in a commission of command responsibility, as I indicated repeatedly. It's only for his own words that he is responsible. And I assume that the ICC is not dealing with that level of statement activity at this point.
Yeah, I think it would have been very picky to go about his words, because one can always take his words out of context, which a lot of people did.
Yeah, we didn't, and we actually acknowledged in our report the full statement that he had made, including the qualifications that he put into his statement. So, we took the thing as a whole. But we have, our mandate is not the same as the ICC's mandate. And I don't know what the ICC is examining, but you're right. I'd also say that it issued its arrest warrants in relation to Netanyahu and Gallant well before we looked at the question of incitement to genocide, which is what we looked at in relation to Herzog.
Okay, you're not. How closely are you connected with the ICC?
It's a totally different body.
Yeah.
One of our terms of reference is to cooperate with judicial processes, and so we provide information to the ICC. But we and they are totally independent of each other in relation to decision making.
Yeah,
So we're cooperating.
I didn't want to talk about because this is not in your ambit, really. The moves of Shurat HaDin to file criminal complaints against the ICC over their accusations that Qatar and British intelligence firms are obstructing justice and in trying to get the chief prosecutor off from the charges against him for sexual harassment that he's facing.
Yeah, to be honest, I have absolutely no knowledge about that.
Hmm.
I mean, it would have been interesting to ask Nitsana that if they're taking that position, what they're doing about the very close collaboration over the last 15 years between Qatar and Netanyahu in funding Hamas.
Well, if I can answer that, I think Israel made a strategic mistake. They thought they could pacify Hamas by giving them sustenance and improving the lifestyle within Gaza. But what it ended up being is 700 kilometers of tunnels that were used to carry out aggression against Israel and store the hostages when they were being kept under their control. So that's what happened. It came back to bite Israel. You thought they could do something nice for Hamas, but it wasn't going to come out well in the end.
Yeah.
That's why I see the way it happened. So we make mistakes.
Yeah, everyone makes mistakes. I accept that.
Yeah, and I think that was a mistake, and I don't think Israel can be blamed for trying to improve the situation of the Palestinians in Gaza.
No, but yeah,
Especially
that's a big question. I mean,
especially when you consider they were lobbing thousands of rockets into Israel for 20 years. That's pretty benign.
Netanyahu has made some monumental strategic mistakes, and I think the military operation in the current Gaza war is another example of that. The prime objective was to destroy Hamas, and Hamas is currently in total control of 48% of the territory of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question. If Israel was committing genocide, obviously they weren't very successful because Hamas is still in military control, and despite all the damage that they've inflicted on Gaza, Hamas still reigns over 48% of the Gaza Strip. It's a rather a dilemma.
Yeah. It's anyway, that's a huge conversation.
Yeah.
I need to go. Thank you very much.
Thanks again. Okay.
And get in touch if you want another.
All right. See if we can frame one.
Okay. Thanks, David.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
See ya.